If your heart feels like it's been shattered into 1,000 pieces, if you're waking up every morning with a tight chest, wondering how someone you loved so deeply could leave you so broken, then stop scrolling. This message is for you. You're not weak for feeling this pain. You're not foolish for having loved. But what you do next, right now, will define not just your recovery, but the rest of your life. Let's have this honest conversation, because your heart deserves better, and so do you. When your heart gets broken, the first instinct, and I mean the very first, is to ask, what did I do wrong? What was missing in me that made them walk away? We all do it. We scan every memory, every conversation, every moment, trying to find the flaw in ourselves that must have pushed them away. But what if I told you that this way of thinking isn't just wrong? It's destructive. You see, when we interpret heartbreak as a sign that we weren't enough, we give that other person an authority over our worth that they should never have had. We hand them the power to define how lovable, desirable, worthy we are. And that is a dangerous game. Because here's the truth. Their inability to stay, to love fully, to commit, to respect, that reflects their capacity, not your value. Think about it like this. If you handed someone a beautiful, priceless gift, and they didn't recognize its worth, does that lower the value of the gift? No. It just means they weren't equipped to see it for what it truly was. Your love, your loyalty, your vulnerability, those were gifts. And if someone mishandled them, it says nothing about the gift itself. It says everything about the person holding it. But the pain feels personal, doesn't it? Because they didn't reject your hairstyle or your taste in movies. They rejected you. Or at least it feels that way. But I want you to remember that when people leave, they're often reacting to things within themselves, their limitations, their fears, their immaturity, and not some lacking in you. We think if we'd been prettier, wittier, more exciting, more understanding, they'd have stayed. But the reality is, for the right person, you wouldn't need to be anything more than who you already are. The right person meets you where you are. They don't make you audition for your own relationship. So instead of asking, why wasn't I enough? The real question is, why did I continue to invest in someone who didn't know how to love me properly? That's where your power lies. When you shift the question from, why wasn't I enough, to, why was I so determined to prove my worth to someone who was blind to it? You stop making the heartbreak about your inadequacy. You start making it about your self-worth. There's a subtle but life-changing difference between these two mindsets. One keeps you chained to the pain, the other sets you free. It's like standing in front of a mirror that's been fogged up. You've been trying to see yourself through the mist of someone else's inability to love you. But that mirror doesn't lie when it's clean, and the clean version says you were always enough. You just had the wrong person standing in the reflection with you. And that leads me to something even deeper, the chemical trap of heartbreak. You're not just emotionally heartbroken. You're chemically addicted to the person who broke you. That's why even when you know it was a toxic relationship, even when your friends remind you how poorly they treated you, a part of you still aches for them. It's maddening. But it's not madness, it's biology. When we're in love, our brain floods us with chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, that create feelings of pleasure, safety, even euphoria. We don't just bond emotionally, we bond chemically. Now, when that person leaves or withdraws their affection, your brain starts to panic. It's like being cut off from a drug you didn't even realize you were hooked on. And just like withdrawal from any addiction, you start craving another hit, a text, a glance, a social media post, something that reconnects you to that chemical high. That's why people obsessively check their ex's social media or send that weak, "I just wanted to check on you" text. Because your brain is screaming for a fix. But here's where your power is. Your brain was trained to crave them, yes, but that also means it can be trained to crave something else. Someone else. Or better yet, your own peace, your own progress, your own growth. Think of it like this. If your mind was conditioned to light up at the sight of them, then it can be reconditioned to light up at the sight of your own evolution. At the sight of a life that has space for new love, deeper friendships, richer experiences. Understanding that heartbreak is as much biology as it is emotion helps you forgive yourself for the cravings. It's not that you're weak, It's that you're wired. But wiring can be rewired. That's the beauty of the human brain. Neuroplasticity, the ability to create new connections, new patterns, new habits. And the first step in that rewiring? Starvation of the old addiction. Stop feeding your mind with their social media updates, their whereabouts, the what-ifs, and the what-could-have-beens. Every time you indulge in those things, you reinforce the neural pathways that keep you stuck. You don't starve an addiction by feeding it occasional snacks. You cut off the supply. Then you replace it. New habits, new routines, new sources of joy, movement, creativity, connection with people who energize you instead of depleting you. Slowly but surely, your brain starts associating those things with happiness instead of the person who broke you. It's not easy, but it's possible. And when you realize that heartbreak isn't just an emotional catastrophe, but a biological challenge you can win, that's when you start taking your power back. We all do this thing when love ends. We romanticize it. We play back the highlight reel in our minds like an old home movie we can't bear to delete. Every laugh, every kiss, every late-night conversation feels like a testament to what was real. And because of that, we convince ourselves that surely, if it was that good, it must have meant something lasting. It must have been special enough to fight for. But what we're really doing is editing the truth. We're cutting out the painful scenes, the silent treatments, the nights we cried ourselves to sleep while lying next to them. We skip over the dismissive glances, the criticisms, the subtle ways they made us feel small. The mind is a masterful editor, especially when we're in pain. It airbrushes memories until all we see is the version we wish had existed all along. But the problem is we start grieving the fantasy, not the reality. We don't mourn the actual relationship. We mourn the one we thought we had, the one we hoped it could be. And that makes moving on impossible, because how can you let go of something that, in your head, was perfect? That's the trick your mind plays on you. It makes you forget the full picture. This is why you need to reality check the relationship. And I mean actually sit down and write it out. Don't just dwell in your mind. That's where the fantasy lives. Put pen to paper. Write down the moments you felt unseen. The times you questioned your worth because of something they did or didn't do. Write the moments when you knew deep down that you deserved more but stayed anyway. I promise you, that list will hurt to write, but it will save you. Because when you find yourself glorifying the connection, when nostalgia comes creeping in like an old song you haven't heard in years, that list will be your antidote to delusion. We tell ourselves, but we had so many great memories. Of course you did. If it were all bad, you wouldn't have stayed. No one stays where there's only pain. But a few great memories do not erase 100 tiny betrayals, or the loneliness you felt while still in the relationship. And yet, we hang on to the good times as if they somehow redeem the rest. That's not love. That's hope dressed up in denial. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Hope can keep you stuck. It can keep you loyal to a version of them that never really existed. And every time you indulge that fantasy, you stitch yourself tighter to the past, making it harder for your future to breathe. That's why the reality check is so important. It's your way of pulling yourself out of the dream and back into the life that's actually waiting for you. Now let's talk about closure, because if you're waiting for them to give it to you, I need you to hear this. Closure is not a gift they hand you with a bow on top. It's a decision you make. And I know that's not the answer anyone wants. We want the apology, the confession, the text that says, "You were everything. I was wrong." But let's be honest. Even if that text came, would it truly satisfy you? Or would it open a new door of questions like, if I was everything, why did you leave? Why didn't you fight for me? Closure given by someone else never actually closes the wound. It just moves the pain around. The only real closure is the one you create. It's when you decide, I am choosing peace for myself. I am choosing to move forward, even without the answers I think I need. That's the hardest part, isn't it? Moving forward with unanswered questions. The human mind craves completion. That's why cliffhangers drive us crazy. But in life, not every story gets a satisfying conclusion. Some people leave without explanation because they lack the courage to face what they've done. Some people lie to themselves so well, they genuinely don't know why they left. So how could they ever explain it to you? If you're waiting for that magical explanation, ask yourself this. Even if they sat down and gave you the most articulate, honest, soul-bearing confession, would it undo the pain? Would it bring back the nights you cried, the self-doubt you carried, the way your confidence eroded slowly over time? It wouldn't. Their words can't give you back the years, the energy, the love you poured in. But you can reclaim it. You can decide, they don't get to have the final word on my story. That's closure. That's the door shutting, not because someone else closed it, but because you realized you're the one holding the handle. We make peace not by understanding why someone hurt us, but by understanding why we no longer want to stay in that pain. That's a decision. It's a daily, sometimes hourly choice to say, I will not keep revisiting the wound hoping for the person who caused it to heal it. You have to be your own healer, your own savior, because the person who broke you isn't coming back to fix you. And even if they tried, they wouldn't know how. Closure is when you wake up and choose yourself, not because they apologized, not because they suddenly became the person you needed, but because you deserve peace, clarity, and a future that isn't chained to a question mark. The relationship might have ended unfinished, but you don't have to stay unfinished. When a relationship ends, it often leaves behind this gaping hole where your identity used to live. Suddenly, the person you were, the one who shared routines, jokes, habits, weekend plans, feels like a stranger to yourself. And that's because whether you realize it or not, we don't just build lives with people. We build selves. We craft identities that are wrapped around the relationship. How we spend our days, how we see ourselves, even what we believe we're capable of. That's why when it all crumbles, you feel lost. The version of you that existed in that relationship no longer has a place, and you wake up wondering, who am I now that they're gone? But here's the part no one tells you. That emptiness you're feeling? That disorientation? It's not a void. It's a blank canvas. And you get to decide what the next version of you looks like. You get to paint that canvas with colors, passions, and pursuits that maybe you'd forgotten about, or never even discovered because you were too busy bending your life to fit someone else's shape. Ask yourself, what were the things I stopped doing because I was in that relationship? Maybe it was writing, maybe it was traveling, maybe it was reconnecting with old friends, or trying new experiences that had nothing to do with impressing or accommodating someone else. These are the breadcrumbs back to yourself. Every single thing you sacrificed or sidelined for the sake of love is a clue pointing to who you really are beneath the heartbreak. And when you start picking up those pieces, you begin building a version of you that's independent, whole, and not defined by we, but by me. We often don't realize just how much of ourselves we've dimmed until the relationship is gone. It's only then that we remember, I used to love this, or I used to feel alive doing that. But you need to chase those things like your peace depends on it, because it does. This is not about distracting yourself from the pain. It's about reconstructing your sense of self so that the pain doesn't get to define you. And here's the most important thing to understand. When you start showing up for yourself, when you start living in ways that excite you, fulfill you, and challenge you, you naturally raise your standards. You no longer become willing to shrink or shapeshift just to make someone else stay. Because you know that you are the source of your own joy, not the presence of another person. But speaking of standards, let's talk about that. Because heartbreak is the ultimate audit of your emotional standards. It's the wake-up call that says, look closely at what you've been tolerating. If you're honest, many of us have allowed ourselves to settle for love that was inconsistent, confusing, or conditional. The kind of love that made us question ourselves more than we felt sure of ourselves. Now is the time to set new emotional standards. And I'm not talking about some Pinterest-worthy list of what your next partner should be like. I'm talking about the non-negotiables you set with yourself about what you will and won't tolerate. Standards like, I will not chase someone who makes me feel like I'm an option. I will not beg for affection, attention, or commitment. I will not stay where I feel invisible. These standards are your emotional boundaries, and they're forged in the fire of your past pain. Every tear you cried, every sleepless night, every pang of anxiety you felt waiting for a text that never came. That was tuition. You paid for those lessons with your heart. Don't waste that investment by repeating the same patterns. It's not enough to say, "I want better." You have to demand better, not from others, but from yourself. Demand better choices, better instincts, better alignment with your worth. That means when someone shows you inconsistency, instead of explaining it away, you recognize it as the deal breaker it is. When someone plays hot and cold, you don't chase the heat, you walk away from the cold. We like to think love is this uncontrollable force, that we can't help who we fall for. But that's not true. You fall for the people you make space for. You fall for the people you permit to linger in your life. So setting new standards is about changing your permissions. Not everyone gets access to your heart, your time, your energy. That access is reserved for those who show up with consistency, respect, and clarity. And I know it's not always easy to enforce these standards. When you're lonely, when you're still raw from heartbreak, the temptation to lower the bar just to feel connected again is strong. But every time you uphold your standard, even when it hurts, you reinforce your self-worth. You remind yourself that you'd rather be alone and whole than together and fragmented. Your heartbreak gave you the blueprint of what not to repeat. Now it's up to you to build on that blueprint. Because the next time love comes knocking, you'll have the discernment to ask, does this feel like peace? Or does this feel like chaos disguised as chemistry? That's the difference between a love that elevates you and a connection that drains you. And the more you honor those standards, the closer you get to the love that's worthy of the person you've become. When your heart is broken, the temptation is to retreat, to pull away from people, from conversations, from connection. You tell yourself you need time, space, solitude, and sometimes that's true. But if you're not careful, that solitude becomes isolation, and isolation is the perfect breeding ground for self-doubt. Because when you're alone with your thoughts long enough, they start to morph. You start believing the critical voice that says, maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I'll never find someone else. Maybe I'm too old, too damaged, too late. And if the only voice you're hearing is your own, especially when it's bruised, that voice can lead you into some dark places. That's why in moments like these, you need mirrors in your life, not echoes. Echoes just bounce back your sadness. They agree with your despair. They tell you what you already believe in your lowest moments, that love is hard, that people can't be trusted, that maybe it's safer to stay alone. But mirrors? Mirrors reflect back to you the version of yourself that you're too hurt to see right now. The strong version, the resilient version, the version that has survived every heartbreak, disappointment, and rejection, and is still standing. You need people in your life who remind you of who you are when you've forgotten. Friends who don't just sit with you in the sadness, but gently pull you out of it. Mentors who speak to the future you, not just the wounded present you. People who challenge you when you're tempted to go back to what broke you. Because make no mistake, there will be moments when the pain makes you nostalgic. When the loneliness convinces you that maybe it wasn't so bad. And in those moments, your mirrors will be the ones who remind you why you left, why it ended, and why you deserve better. But finding those mirrors isn't always easy, especially if your circle is small, or if the people around you are dealing with their own heartbreaks and can only echo your pain. That's why you have to actively seek them. Sometimes they come in the form of new friendships or communities you've yet to explore. Sometimes it's through books, podcasts, videos that light something up inside you that you thought was dead. Sometimes it's reconnecting with people you've drifted from. The ones who always made you feel like more, not less. You need reminders. Not just of who you were before the heartbreak, but of who you could be after it. Because the truth is, heartbreak can either shrink you or expand you. And the people you surround yourself with will determine which one it is. So ask yourself, who in my life makes me feel seen? Who challenges me to rise instead of sink? And if the answer isn't obvious, go out and find those people. Seek them like your healing depends on it, because it does. And once you start seeing yourself again, through the right mirrors, you'll notice something extraordinary happens. The pain starts transforming into something else. It starts becoming fuel. And that's where the real magic begins, when you turn your pain into purpose. Most people treat pain like a dead end, as if once you're hurt, that's it. You just carry it like baggage. But pain can be your beginning if you let it. Because inside that pain are lessons that can't be taught any other way. Inside that heartbreak is wisdom, clarity, strength you didn't even know you had. But only if you choose to use it. Think about it. What did this heartbreak teach you about yourself? About your boundaries? About what you want and what you'll never settle for again? That knowledge is power. And it's meant to be shared, expressed, channeled into something bigger than the relationship that broke you. Maybe it's your art, your career, your relationships with friends and family. Maybe it's the way you mentor someone else who's going through their own heartbreak. When you turn pain into purpose, you stop being the victim of your story and start becoming the author. You get to write the next chapter with the kind of authority that only comes from having survived something that tried to break you. That pain becomes your credential, your experience, your depth. And here's the best part. When you're living with purpose, when you're growing, creating, building, connecting, you stop seeing your past as this tragic, unfortunate thing that happened to you. You start seeing it as the very thing that sculpted you into someone who is ready. Ready for the next great love. Ready for opportunities that match your worth. Ready for the life that's been waiting for you on the other side of this heartbreak. But it doesn't just happen. It's a choice, a commitment. Every day you wake up and decide, I will not let this pain define me. I will let it refine me. That's how you win. Not by pretending it didn't hurt. Not by rushing to replace the person you lost. But by becoming someone so whole, so purpose-driven, that the next person has to earn a place in your life. Because you're no longer willing to hand your heart to anyone who doesn't match the love and respect you've built for yourself. That's how you transform heartbreak from an ending into a powerful, undeniable beginning. If you're still listening, let me tell you, you are stronger than you feel right now. This heartbreak is not your ending. It's your awakening. So tell me in the comments, which of these points hit you the hardest? What's your next step towards healing? I'd love to hear your story. And remember, this is a community. Let's support each other. If this message spoke to your soul, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure to subscribe, because we're just getting started. Drop your topic suggestions below. What do you want us to dive into next? Let's grow together. Your comeback starts now.